What happens to Amish girls who get pregnant before marriage? My mother never told me the truth until I was 18. The third stair from the top always creaked. That night, it didn't, and that was worse. I'm 16, barefoot. My nightgown is the cotton one Mama made me for my last birthday, the one with the small tear under the arm I never told her about. The house smells like the bread she baked that afternoon and the kerosene from the lamp she forgot to trim. My feet are cold. My mouth tastes like sleep and something metal I can't name yet. I'm coming down because I heard her crying. Not Mama, my sister, Sarah. She's 17 and she's been married 4 months and she's home, and she's not supposed to be home. I stop on the landing. I press my back against the wall where the wallpaper has the little blue flowers that don't quite line up at the seam. I used to count them when I couldn't sleep. I hear Mama's voice, low, then Sarah's, then one sentence I will carry for the rest of my life. If anyone asks, the baby came early. I don't move. I don't breathe. I stand there until my legs go numb and the lamp downstairs flickers twice. I was 16. I wouldn't understand what I'd just heard for 2 more years. Quick pause. My name is Rebecca, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it's the reason I can keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, what's one thing the women in your life never told you until it was almost too late? And if you want to go further, a super chat or a membership, that's you telling me these voices are worth hearing. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. Nobody ever sat me down and told me what happens to an Amish girl who gets pregnant before she's married. Nobody had to. You learn it the way you learn which floorboards creak and which ones don't, by living on top of it your whole life. The rule was simple and it was everywhere. A girl's body was not hers. It belonged to God first, then her father, then her husband. That's the order. That's the line. And the moment her body did something outside that order, wanted something, felt something, made something, she was the one who'd broken it. Not the boy, her. Always her. The Ordnung doesn't write that down anywhere. It doesn't have to. The community writes it on you with looks, with silences, with the way a woman's name stops being said at the supper table. And the thing that shaped me more than anything was watching what happened to the girls before me. There was a girl 2 farms over. I won't say her name because her mother is still living. She disappeared one winter. Sent to relatives in Indiana, they said. Came back 10 months later with a thinner face and no baby, and nobody ever spoke of it again. I was 12. I remember asking my older cousin where she'd been, and my cousin just looked at me. That look. You know that look. The one that says don't. I didn't ask again. That's how the rule taught itself. Not through sermons. Through one look from a girl 4 years older than you. And by the time I was 14, I understood without being told. There are 2 kinds of Amish girls. The ones who follow the order, and the ones who get erased. I decided early which one I'd be. His name was Eli. He was 19 when we started courting, and 20 when we married. No, wait, 21. He'd had his birthday in March, and we married in November. I always get that wrong. I met him at a singing the summer I turned 18. He had hands that were already old from the fields, and a laugh he tried to hide behind his teeth, like he was embarrassed to be happy. My sister Sarah pulled me aside 3 weeks before the wedding. 3 weeks. She walked me out behind the smokehouse where the lilac bush had already lost its blooms, and she held both my hands, and she said 13 words. I counted them later. I counted them for years. Let him do what he needs to. It'll be over before you know. That was it. That was my preparation. 13 words from the only person in the world I thought might tell me the truth. She squeezed my hands once, and then she went back inside and started peeling potatoes like nothing had happened. And I stood there by the lilac bush with my mouth open and no words coming out. I didn't ask her what she meant. In our community, you just don't. You take what you're given and you fold it small, and you put it in the place inside you where you keep the other folded things. And Eli. I have to tell you about Eli, because if I don't, you'll think he was the villain of this story, and he wasn't. He was a boy, a kind one. He brought me a piece of honeycomb the 3rd time we drove home from a Sunday singing, and his hands shook when he gave it to me. He kept pulling at the seam of his left sleeve when he was nervous, over and over. I noticed that the first time he walked me to my father's door, and I noticed it again on our wedding day, and I noticed it that night. He didn't know any more than I did. That's what I want you to understand before I tell you the rest. Neither of us knew. We were two children in grown bodies, told that God would handle the rest. The week of the wedding, the women came. They came with pies and with quilts and with their hands ready for work, and they talked about everything in the world except the one thing I needed to know. My mother washed my hair the night before with the rainwater she'd been saving in the barrel out back. She combed it out by the lamp, and she didn't say a word. I kept waiting. I kept thinking, surely now, surely she's going to tell me something. But she just combed, and then she kissed the top of my head and she said, "You're a good girl, Rebecca." And she blew out the lamp. And that's the thing nobody tells you. The silence isn't loud. It's just steady. It's just there. Like weather. The room had one window, and the window faced east. I remember that because Eli's mother had told me the morning sun would wake us, and she'd smiled when she said it, and I hadn't understood why. The bed was new. His uncle had built it as a wedding gift, and the wood still smelled like the workshop, that sharp green smell of pine that hasn't been sealed yet. There was one oil lamp on the small table by the wall, a quilt my grandmother had finished 6 months before she died, a pitcher of water, my nightgown laid out on the chair, white, pressed, folded in thirds. I was wearing my hair down for the first time in front of a man. It felt like being naked before I was naked. The November cold pressed against the window glass. Somewhere a horse moved in the barn. The house was so quiet I could hear Eli swallow from across the room. He sat on the edge of the bed. I sat in the chair. Neither of us looked at the other for what felt like an hour, but was probably 4 minutes. He kept pulling at that seam on his left sleeve. I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth so hard I tasted blood. He said, "Rebecca." I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you?" And then he stopped, because he didn't have the words either. Nobody had given him the words. He'd grown up the same way I had, on the same silences, in the same kitchens, with the same fathers who never spoke of these things. He looked like a lost boy in a man's shirt. And God, I wanted to help him. That's the strange part. I wanted to make it easier for him. That was the only thing I'd been trained to do. He stood up. He crossed the room. His hand moved. I stopped breathing. He said, "Sarah told me. She said you'd know what to do." And I almost laughed, but the laugh got caught somewhere in my chest and turned into something else. I didn't know what to do. I thought he was supposed to know. He thought I was. We stood there in the lamplight, and I felt my body go still the way a rabbit goes still when it hears the dog. I wanted to pull away and move closer at the same time. He whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't know what he was sorry for yet. And then it happened. The way things happen when nobody has taught you any other way for them to happen. Quickly and quietly and in the dark. I kept my eyes on the ceiling beam. There was a knot in the wood shaped like a small bird. I looked at the bird. I kept looking at the bird. Afterward, he turned his back to me, and I heard him breathing the way men breathe when they're trying not to cry. I didn't touch him. I didn't know if I was allowed. I lay there, and I noticed the quilt had a loose thread coming out of one of the blue squares, and I pulled it. I kept pulling. The thread came out longer than I thought it would. By the time I stopped, it was wrapped twice around my finger, and the square had a small pucker in the corner where my grandmother's stitches had given way. I thought, I'll fix that in the morning. I never did. That quilt is in a cedar chest in Ohio now, and the pucker is still there. Neither of us understood that what was supposed to happen between us required something nobody had ever told us the name of. I didn't know my body could feel anything but obedience. He didn't know he was supposed to ask. We had been given a sacrament with half the words missing, and we'd both stood at the altar and said yes to a thing we couldn't read. The ordnung said a husband had rights and a wife had duties, and that was the whole of the teaching. There was no word for what I didn't feel that night. There was no word for what he didn't know to give. The harm wasn't in him. It wasn't even in me. It was in the empty space between us where the truth was supposed to live, and didn't. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. I need you to understand that. He was a good man doing the only thing he'd been taught a good man does. And I was a good girl doing the only thing I'd been taught a good girl does. And the people who'd raised us had been raised the same way, and their parents before them, all the way back to a country and a century I've never seen. The silence wasn't an accident. It was the inheritance. Years later, I would learn one word, that would have changed everything in that room. I'll tell you what it was. But not yet. Because first I have to tell you what the silence did to me for the next 9 years. The pattern set itself fast. By the end of our first month, I had learned to know the sound of his boots on the porch in the evening. 2 steps, a pause, the scrape of the mud off on the iron rail, and my body would do a small tightening thing before my mind had even caught up. Not fear, not exactly. Just preparation. I learned to go somewhere else inside myself. I had a place. I called it the upstairs room, though there was no actual room. And I'd go up there and look out a window that didn't exist while my body did what wives do. I'd come back when it was over. I'd make him coffee. I learned to bake his mother's shoe-fly pie better than his mother did. I learned every small ritual a woman uses to disappear in plain sight. And the joke of it, the dark, quiet joke, is that I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only woman in Lancaster County who went upstairs. Turns out that's the community's best-selling lie. I learned that at a quilting bee in the spring of our 2nd year. There were 6 of us around the frame in Mary Yoder's front room, the room with the window that always stuck. And the conversation drifted the way it does when men are out in the fields and the babies are asleep. Mary said something. I don't even remember what. Then Lydia, who was barely 20, looked down at her stitches and said, "I just hold my breath and count to 100. And nobody laughed. Nobody scolded her. There was just this pause. Anna across the frame said, "I count the boards on the ceiling." Sarah Byler said, "Bible verses, Psalms, 7 words. That's all anyone said." Then Mary cleared her throat and asked who wanted more coffee, and the moment closed up like it had never opened. But I sat there with my needle in my hand and I realized, every woman in this room has an upstairs room. Every single one. That was the day I almost told Sarah, my own sister, the one with the 13 words, what it was really like for me. I walked her out to her buggy after, and the sun was low, and the dogwood was just starting to bloom along the lane, and I said, "Sarah," and she turned, and she looked at me, and she had that same look my cousin had given me when I was 12, that look that says, "Don't." So I said, "Drive safe." And she said, "I will." And I watched her buggy until it was a small black square at the bend in the road. There was a girl 2 districts over, I'll call her Hannah, because that wasn't her name, who tried to talk. Tried to ask the bishop's wife a question about her marriage. Word got around inside of a week. Her own mother sat her down and told her some things were sacred and some things were private, and the woman who couldn't tell the difference was the woman who shamed her family. Hannah stopped asking. 4 months later, I saw her at a funeral, and her eyes had that quiet, flat look I'd started to recognize in my own mirror. By our 3rd year, I knew. I knew this was all of us. And I knew none of us were ever going to say it out loud. I left when I was 27. I don't have time tonight to tell you that whole story. That's its own telling, for another night. But I left. And a year after I left, I was sitting in a small office in Columbus, Ohio, on a green couch with a coffee stain on the left arm, across from a woman named Dr. Patel. She had a diagram on a clipboard. She turned it toward me. She used a word I had never heard in my life. Consent. She said it like it was an ordinary word, like everyone knew what it meant. And then she said another one. Arousal. And then a third. Anatomy. She drew a small circle on the paper and named a part of my body I was 28 years old and had never been told existed. I don't know how to describe what happened in my chest in that moment. My hands started shaking. I couldn't make them stop. I sat on them. They kept shaking under my legs. I wasn't angry. That's the part nobody understands. I was just sad, devastatingly sad. Sad for the girl who stood by the lilac bush waiting for her sister to tell her the truth. Sad for the girl who looked at the knot in the ceiling beam shaped like a bird. Sad for Eli, who was somewhere in Pennsylvania right now, probably still pulling at the seam of his left sleeve, still not knowing that there had been a whole language he was supposed to learn, and nobody had ever given him the dictionary. He wasn't the villain. He never was. He was a boy who'd been handed a wife the way you're handed a tool you've never used, and told God would teach him how. God didn't. Nobody did. That's the thing nobody tells you about the silence. It doesn't just hurt the girls. It hurts the boys, too. It hurts everyone it touches. And it touches everyone. I tried to explain this once to a woman at the grocery store who'd asked me, kindly, where I was from. I said the words, Amish, left at 27, and she said, "Oh, but it must have been so beautiful, the simple life." And I stood there with a carton of eggs in my hand, and I couldn't find a single sentence that would carry what I needed her to understand. She wasn't wrong. It had been beautiful. It had also broken something in me that took 6 years and a green couch and a woman named Dr. Patel to even begin to name. But how do you say that between the produce and the dairy aisle? You don't. You smile and you say, "Yes, it was," and you push your cart toward the bread. That's the loneliness nobody warned me about. The community I came from doesn't have the words. The world I came to doesn't have the context. I live in the gap between them. I've made a kind of home there, but it's a small home, and the wind comes through the walls. I want to tell you the 3 things I still carry, the good things, because they're real and they're mine, and nobody can take them. The first is the sound of horses at dawn, that soft snort and shift, the harness leather creaking, the breath you can see in the cold air before the sun is even up. I have not heard that sound in 9 years, and I hear it every morning in my head when I wake up. The second is the smell of bread from my mother's wood oven, that crust, that yeast, that warmth, the way she'd turn the loaves out onto the wooden board and tap the bottoms to listen. I bake bread every Saturday in my apartment. It never smells the same, but I keep trying. The third is the way my grandmother's hands looked when she was praying, bent at the knuckles from 70 years of work, folded one over the other on the kitchen table, the gold of her wedding band almost worn through. She prayed for me. She is buried under a small white stone in a field outside Lidditz. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. Both of those things are true at the same time. What happened to me, what happens to so many girls like me, has a name now. I didn't have it then. I have it now. It was silence dressed up as holiness. 5 words. That's the whole sentence. The community gave me bread and horses and my grandmother's hands. It also gave me a wedding night I spent looking at a knot in the ceiling. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. I know that now. I'm not here to burn the house down. I'm just here to open the windows. I'm building something else now. A life with words in it, with questions in it, with a kitchen of my own where the curtains are whatever color I want them to be. And sometimes, on Sunday mornings, I sing the hymns I grew up with, in German, quietly, by myself, because they're still mine, too. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. If you were handed a wedding night with half the words missing and told God would handle the rest, I see you. If you've spent years going to an upstairs room inside yourself just to survive the night, I see you. You are not broken. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You don't have to have left. You don't have to have stayed. You don't have to have a tidy ending or a clean story. You just have to be here, still breathing, still listening. That's already so much more than they told you you were capable of. To the woman still inside the community, washing dishes after supper tonight, I see you. To the woman who left and still cries when she smells fresh bread, I see you. To the woman thinking about leaving, sitting in a buggy somewhere with a question in her chest she can't say out loud, I see you. To the woman who's been married 20 years and only tonight is starting to wonder why it always felt like that, I see you. To the woman who recognized herself 3 minutes ago and hasn't moved since, I see you. Wherever you are in this, I see you. And you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this. If there was one moment, one sentence that landed somewhere tender in you, tell me what it was. I read them. I read all of them. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, about the bishop, about my mother, about the night I actually left, but I'm getting closer. If you want to walk with me through those, this is Rebecca Amish Home, and the door is open. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. You were never the sin. You were the silence's survivor.